Today we are going to see and understand how this very cool effect that CodePen shared of a person called Ines, who made this CodePen called Glowy Hover Effect, and which looks something like how I would show you. So what I've done is I've copied this CodePen's code, HTML, CSS and a little bit of JavaScript onto my local computer and running it there so that I can tinker around with it. And this, okay, not like that. I think I've commented something, so let me just uncomment and show it to you. This is how it looks like. It's pretty cool, and especially the CTA thing that is happening below. It is almost like different kind of lights are making something more evident, sort of like a torch kind of effect is coming. And so let's just dive in and understand how it is happening. I just spent some time doing that, and whatever I understood, I'm just going to share it. So I've uncommented the JavaScript initialization code so that when you see these cards and you hover over them, nothing exciting happens. So what is happening, what we will do is go through the HTML structure, how it is looking like, just skim through some of the base template CSS that is making it look like this, and then dive into how the glow effect is happening. So let's just start with HTML, how it is structured. So we have body has main has this heading, and the sibling is this div called cards. This is the topmost container. Everything is inside of it. Inside of it, there are two elements. One is the inner container, you could say, which contain all of these cards, and a parallel sibling. A sibling of this inner container is another sort of like a container itself called overlay. It has the same styling, like the class name for it is also cards inner, but it is also a class called overlay, which will help it behave in a manner that we will see in a bit. So this is the HTML, and if we talk about CSS, so we just have some like a reset kind of thing happening where we're setting all items as border box sizing, margin padding 0, HTML body, some with like height stuff, and then body styles, UL, main heading, and all of these styles are happening. And I think up until here, yeah, so all of the styles are just standard styles, which you could understand very easily. So one thing that I didn't know from reading all these base styles was this particular thing, and I think that it might be interesting to just mention it very quickly. So there is a checkbox, sort of like after content, I think after or before, I don't know, before content for LIs, which is an SVG image. This checkbox that you are seeing. So this is an inline SVG image, and it has a transform translate y of 0.25 ch. Now I didn't know what the ch meant, so I just quickly searched for it. It is called character unit, which is the width of the character 0 of that font, and it only works for fonts which are monospaced or have fixed width and are unpredictable for proportional fonts like Arial. And I don't know if the font that she has used, which is League Spartan, which is a very nice font by the way, is a fixed width font or not, but it doesn't really matter here, because what it is used for is sort of like a reset kind of thing to just make this SVG align a little better, which could have been done with, I think, the with pixels or any other unit as well, but I think ch just made sense here, and it just looks it is so easy to see that it is 1/4 of the character width zero of zero character the 1/4 of the width of character 0 in this font. So I don't know, it just looks a little neater, so I felt like mentioning it. Moving on, where were we? Here, yes. So coming to let's start with the cards were, if I recall, the topmost header for topmost container for everything. So it has a position relative, and this is position relative because the div that we talked about, which is right now an empty div, but it will fill up in a while using JavaScript. The overlay div is absolutely positioned on top of the inner the container which contains the 3 cards. And you might be getting a little bit of idea of why that might be happening, but let's just keep going on. I didn't know why that was happening up until I actually understood what CSS property is making that masking effect. So let's just keep moving on with this in our head, that overlay container is absolutely positioned so that it is right over the cards, the cards container, the inner container, which has the 3 cards, right? So if we move forward, so this is just that template stuff, some layouting is happening here. So first thing that we see is card has a CSS variable set here for its scope, which is HSL value, and it is a combination of other CSS variables, which are hue, saturation, and lightness. So these are not set right now in our code, like we are not seeing it set anywhere, but they will soon set. Actually, they are just getting set in the next lines. Everything apart from it is very basic. You can see that the default background color that you are seeing for all these cards is this HSL 0017%. I was just tinkering about to see what this color was in HSL. So if you see the original code pen, you will find the hex value for it. It doesn't matter. Border is this, and if you go down and if you see that the cards which are not the child of a parent with class overlay, basically all the cards that are actually here in the inner container, so these are these cards basically. So all of those cards, on hover, their background would be whatever the value of HSL is with the opacity of 0.1. So this is this hover effect that you're seeing that makes this background a little light. And if you see this lightness, where this lightness is being used, this is here itself, right? So as soon as hover happens, lightness is set to 95%. Background of the card becomes this, and the value of HSL is dependent on lightness also, so which we saw in the base styles of the card class lightness. So the lightness gets set to 95%, which is very light, because of which that light gray thing comes. And anyway, so this is what is happening on hover. Now is the interesting part that we'll get to see. So now let's cover all of these things. So the first card has these particular hue, saturation, lightness set. Second has this, third has this, but it doesn't have any effect right now because this SHL value, the variable, is not used anywhere, because by default the background color of the card is this dark gray color. So this is not coming into effect right now, but it will very soon. So you just keep in mind that all of these first, second, and third childs the cards, first, second, third cards basically, have some background color kind of thing set for themselves, which is not activated yet. And there are some default styles for CTA. I think we are not going to need this. So this CTA is basically this. And overlay, as we have already seen, it is position absolute with inset 0. Inset is a short for doing position, not position, but top, left, right, and bottom 0. Individually, instead of doing them individually 0, we do inset 0 and it has the same effect. We don't want anybody to be able to click or select anything that might live inside of overlay. Just helping you recall that overlay doesn't have anything in it right now, but whenever it will not have any pointer events or user select events on it. Opacity will be whatever the opacity variable is, or 0. So the second argument of this variable function that CSS has, I don't know if it is called a function or what, but the second argument of it is a default value if opacity variable is not set. This is where the magic is happening, and we will soon see what this mask is. And there's some transition happening on the mask, and because for performance reasons, we are telling the browser that the mask property will change, will transition, will animate. And what else? Yes, so all of these things will just come back to right now. So this is the state, what the state of our whole CSS and HTML is. Now we will jump on to the JavaScript and try to understand what is happening here. So if you see here, let's uncomment only this one line and see what is happening. It's adding an event listener pointer move, which is basically whenever our mouse will move anywhere on the screen, this function is getting called. And what this function is doing, it is capturing the current target, which in our case will be body, because we have set the add event listener on body. And now here what it is doing is, it is basically detecting what X and Y are. And what are these X and Y? So I'll just very quickly log these e.page X. What is it basically, and just help you see what basically is this. I didn't know, so I just quickly googled. Page X is basically what is the value of the X on the mouse, to put it very simply. So if I go to console, if I clear it off and refresh, and if I start moving my mouse, so if you see that if I go to the end of my screen, it says 19, 90, 90, 20, whatever. If I go to the left, it says 0. So this is literally the position of the mouse on the screen, right? And this card container is what? It is the topmost container, card container that we have, and it's offset left. So it is basically the value of this X, how much of it is this top left of the container. Similarly, offset top is the length from the top of the browser to the top left of the container, right? So basically the value that we are getting by subtracting the mouse positions with the container offset left and top is the position of the mouse starting from here. So for example, if I just log X and Y here and I refresh this and I try to come here, you will see that I'm getting very close to 0, 0, right? So it is basically these values, X and Y, are basically the measure of where the mouse is relative to our cards container, right? So this is our 0, 0, basically sort of like resetting of coordinates from 0, 0 here to 0, 0 here. And we will see how this will help. So what we are doing now here is we are changing the style of body to include these three CSS variables. Opacity one, which could have been like, we do not really need to dynamically keep setting it always. We could have had it in CSS, but anyway, the X and the Y variables that are there, we are setting it to the body styles. So if, for example, if I just refresh here and I go to my inspector, I go to the body and I refresh once, and as you can see right now on the body there is nothing. But if I start moving the mouse, you can see that the X and Y CSS variables are getting set. You can also see it here. We are setting it inline, and now this is where the magic will start happening, because these CSS variables values are getting changed. Whosoever will use those values would be able to leverage their changing, right? So this is what one thing is happening. Now the second thing that is happening here is for all the cards that we have. So these cards are basically all our cards, the three cards that we have. We are doing something with them. So we are calling this function init overlay card. Now let's understand what it is doing. Without going through the code, let me just quickly show you what has happened to the overlay container that we had. Remember that this, before we had that line commented, like, yeah, before I had uncommented it, basically this div was empty, but it is not empty anymore. It has identical kind of cards which are in our inner container, main inner container cards. So if you hover over them, they are basically the same cards as they were before, but they only have the CTAs in them. There is no other. Basically this is the replica of the CTAs on top of CTA. So you can imagine, if you imagine layer wise, and if I just open Excalidraw here to try to visualize it, this is what is happening. There are these three cards. Let me quickly copy them so that I have three of them. And then we have an overlay container. Let me picture it with green. And inside of this overlay container, okay, this is not green anymore. Let me make it black again. And now select green. This is an overlay that is sitting right on top of it. And here we only, okay, so if I just go back and draw the CTAs that we have here, right, along with the other content that we have here. So for the content, I'll just do something like this. And now we have this container, overlay container, right? And inside of this container, let me make it a little thicker. How do I make it? Take a background, okay, like this. And inside of this overlay, we have three identical, okay, we have let me make it transparent again, a little thick. Let me use blue and do this. We have like just copying what we have for these cards that are beneath. We have three more cards. So if I revisit this, what are these cards? These are these three replication of cards that are sitting on top of the original cards, and inside of them there is this replica of the CTA. So there's a CTA sitting on top of CTA, and so on and so forth for all these cards. So how is this happening? Let's quickly check. And why is this happening? We'll see just in a bit. For each of the cards, we are creating a div, which is this overlay card, which is depicted by blue here. We are adding the class card on it as well. So it has identical layout styles that the original cards have. So if you see, these cards also have card class name. These also have card class name, and that is happening from here. And then we are calling some function called create overlay CTA, which is basically, as the name suggests, it will create this CTA on top of the original CTA, right? So how is that CTA getting created? It's just a matter of a function call, which is taking the overlay card that we have recently made and the last child of the original card, which incidentally here is the original CTA. So each, basically, if we see in the xcali draw very quickly, this is the last child. So we are passing it to this function. So what it will basically do is it will create another div, add CTA class to it, copy the content from the original CTA into this overlay CTA, set ARIA attribute hidden because we don't want anything to do with it. It's purely stylistic CTA that is not going to help us in any other way, and we are appending it to overlay CTA, right? So nothing major is happening. We're just creating a CTA in that duplicate card that we have created, overlay card, and then we are appending the overlay card to the overlay. So this is the reason why we are seeing these three replicated cards with only the CTA replicated inside of them, these three, right? So this is replicated CTA 1, 2, and 3. So far so good. All right. Now what is happening is we'll come back to the CSS and we'll see that let's get some things clear and done out of the way, like already. So let's see what is happening with the cards that are inside of overlay, right? And let me just also okay, if I do that, then never mind. As soon as I comment these mask things and I refresh, and as soon as I refresh, nothing happens, but as soon as I move my cursor, all of these cards get these bright fluorescent kind of colors. How is this happening? I was confused a little. It took me a while to understand, but what is happening is that this is happening. Basically, all of these colors are added to the replicated cards that we have inside of overlay. So these are these cards. If you see, we have this background color and everything applied here. These three properties are applied to the cards which are inside of overlay container, basically, right? And they got visibly suddenly when we moved the cursor. For example, they are not there right now, but as soon as I move my cursor, they get they get shown, is because the opacity variable that is set on overlay. So the opacity is not set anywhere before, but as soon as we move the pointer for the first time here, we set the opacity variable to 1. And that is why the overlay becomes suddenly visible. And because overlay becomes suddenly visible, all the children of the overlay with these particular properties also get shown. So that is how these three colors are getting shown, right? So now what is happening? I'll just uncomment all. Okay, so we have seen what is happening to the cards. We can also see that these replicated CTAs that are sitting in the overlay cards instead of our original cards that we had just talked about and copied, they also have it. Those CTAs also have background of HSL, and these HSLs are, if we just recall, set where these are set here. We had set them way back when we were writing our code itself. So those were not visible for the original cards that are inside of the inner container, basically these cards, because they already have this border color set for them. But we have explicitly set the border color for overlay cards as the one which are set for HSL. So as soon as that is used, it sees where is the HSL at its most closest scope, which is inside of card itself, and where is it? It is here. It is set here with these selectors. So far so good, right? So if we see from the original, we are just we have to do something which will basically remove all the color that we have right now and only color a particular portion when we move the move our pointer, our cursor, our mouse on top of these cards, right? So how is that happening? And before we do that, okay, so I think that this is what we will have to see. But before we see, okay, so just there is no secret at all. It's just right in front of us. There is a CSS property called mask, which helps us do this. But before we uncomment this mask CSS, let's uncomment this background CSS, which has the same radial gradient that we have used for mask, but it will help us understand something a little better. So I've uncommented it and I'll refresh it. And if you see, if I hover over it, the X and Y are 0 here, right? And what is this radial gradient? It says that it needs a 25 by 25 ellipse, which is basically a circle which has 25 rem of like I think it is something like this. I might be wrong, but it has something to do with like 25 and 25 are basically, I think, these things. I am forgetting what it is called for a typical ellipse, but because both of these are same in value, the ellipse is a circle incidentally. So these are the diameters, basically the what do we say, axis, the length of the axis of the ellipse at variable X and Y, because remember X and Y are changing because we are changing them on pointer move event, and we had just seen how X and Y were changing and what these were, because these are changing with respect to where our container is. So the value of X and Y is 0 and 0 here, right? And it increases when it goes here. So what is happening on in independence of it is that we are setting the radius of this circle at X and Y points, and because we move the cursor, the coordinates where the center of the circle is basically not the radius. I misspoke there. The center of the circle also changes because X and Y are changing. So this is where CSS is sort of playing around with what we are doing with JavaScript. And this is saying basically is that up until 1%, the value of this thing will be, the value of the gradient will be black. I think if we change this, we might be able to see it. I'm not sure. Let's just make it a weird yellow-green kind of thing. I saved it and let's refresh and see what happens. Yeah. So this is the up until 1%. We can make it 20, 50, whatever. If I do 20, then up until 20, you will see a that particular color, and then it will grade out to be transparent. So what we are saying here is black up until 1% of the radial, what do you say? I don't know what to say, like what is the technical term for that is, but up until 1% of the radial radius, I don't know, it is going to be black, and then it is from 1% to 50%, it is going to grade out, it is going to become transparent. I think that is what it is saying. Up until 50%, after 50%, there's going to be nothing because it has become transparent. So this is what you are seeing here. The background of the overlay, we are inside of the overlay class right now, is this, right? Now how do we make this background act reverse, that wherever it is going, we don't see the background color that we are seeing here, the green color, but instead we just see the projection of that green color in a radial manner, only where we are seeing this radial background right now. So it turns out mask does exactly that thing, that it will sort of like mask everything else that is happening uh, with the background of this overlay, which might be set somewhere else. Where no the background is set for the cards, not for the overlay. So what will happen, because overlay cards are children of overlay, and we have set mask on overlay, the mask will basically revert all the background color that might be there wherever it is being applied at, and it will basically uh, it will black out or just remove everything else, and at the place of the gradient where we were seeing the background when we had uncommented this, we will instead see the color of the card that has been set by the HSL. So HSL variable here, which were again set from here, right? So if we refresh this, there is as we move the mouse, according to that, our mask is hovering over a particular place, and whatever the color of the cards is set in the background, it sort of reverts it and only shows what the mask is saying it to show, which is this radial circle that we have made in this particular fashion, that it fades, it only exists up until 50%, and then it becomes like sort of like transparent. It fades into being transparent radially, and it works across the cards because different cards have different colors, right? And because the most interesting part is for these CTAs, it sort of like really looks like as the light approaches the CTA, the color of the CTA becomes darker and darker. There is no trickery happening here. It's the same reason that is happening here. Just that because these CTA replicas that we had made, that we had discussed a while back, they also have the background color of HSL variable that we have. That is why when the mask is coming on top of that child also, it is behaving the same way as it is behaving anywhere on the card. So that is it basically. This is the reason, and this is how this effect is being this glow effect is made. And it was very interesting exercise to learn more about how masks work. So there is a very so before this article I didn't even know what HSL scale was. Turned out it is the most easiest I think easiest color format to work with, because it is just so intuitive to understand it. This is a very brilliant article by Josh Camus. I will link it in the description. And this is a very beautiful article that just shows different things that are possible with CSS masking. And one of the examples that blew me away was this very cool thing that that he had made a demo of here. This thing, like there's a picture, and he is sort of like making grids out of, like a columnar grids out of it, and then he's also masking all of them so that it sort of fades away a little, something like this. Very pretty effect. So I'll also link this, and while understanding how radial gradient works, I obviously went through the MDN docs for both mask and radial gradient, and I think that is pretty much it. I hope you this was interesting for you. I did my best to help understand you what I learned when I learned this code. One thing that that you would have seen in the JS file is that I have removed this resize observer that is that every card is being subjected to, and that is because didn't understand why she had added this, and because the glow effect was working without it also. So I asked her, and I think she has answered. Let's see what she has said. Overlay children, I recorded my screen to show what I mean, just in case my words are a bit confusing. Okay, good question. It's to basically make the overlay responsive. Okay, when you resize the window, the size positions of the card also change, right? So I use resize observer to detect any resizing of viewport, which allows me to dynamically update widths and heights and positions of overlay children. Okay. When I had checked this, it was automatically happening, but I might be missing something. Yeah, so it resized, and okay, resized again, and the width and height of the children changed. Let's see, let's check this for ourselves. Let's go to Firefox, and I'll make it talk to right, and I have that commented still. So if I just go here and I try to go around it, it kind of seems to have the same effect, but I can see that there is this overlap that is happening. Okay, this is what she's fixing. Understood. So let's just do this and refresh, and again resize it, and if you see that it is working right now. So let's just reply to this, reply to her. Thanks. The margin of difference was so less, it sort of slipped my eye to see that. See what was happening if the resize observer was not in place. Thanks. Thanks again. Very, very cool. The margin of difference of normal and overlay cards was so less while resizing. It sort of slipped out of my eye. I missed it. It will be better. While resizing, I missed it. I missed to see what was happening with resizing. Thanks again. Alright, that was it. See you in the next one.